Howdy, I'm Raymond Robertson. I'm a senior fellow at the Texas-Mexico Center at SMU, and I've been doing research on Texas, Mexico, and the United States for almost 30 years. The work that the SMU Texas-Mexico Center has been doing is incredibly important, it's relevant for today, and I'd like to tell you a little bit about the research that I've been doing with the center. The Texas-Mexico relationship, as you know, is incredibly important. One of the reasons why this relationship is so important is because global value chains dominate world trade. Global value chains closely link the Mexican and U.S. economies and dominate the world trade to the tune of 70 to 90%. If you look at the relationship between Mexican workers and U.S. workers, what work that I've done shows that the U.S. and Mexican production workers are complements, not substitutes. If you look at a time series graph of the hours of the Mexican and U.S. production workers, obreros in Spanish, it shows quite clearly that the two series move together rather than in opposite directions as you would expect if Mexicans were taking U.S. jobs. That's simply not the case. We really should be thinking of North America as a single production relationship, a single production unit. If you look at Texas in particular, the main export destination for Texas exports is Mexico. Texas exports more than any other state in the country, and the largest share of those exports are going to Mexico. If you look at the importance of U.S.-Mexican trade, it's been rising steadily over the last 30 years, and Texas has been playing a very important part. If you look at the figures, over $109 billion in exports to Mexico in 2016 coming out of Texas, and 35% of those exports are going to Mexico. If you look at China, Mexico, and Texas, China, Mexico, and Texas have a very significant relationship. As you probably know, China affects the global economy and the U.S.-Mexico relationship. For example, after the North American Free Trade Agreement went into effect, one of the sectors that grew most quickly was apparel. U.S.-Mexico apparel trade grew significantly, and apparel production grew in importance in Mexico. This figure shows a pie chart of U.S. apparel imports in the year 2000. As you can see, Mexico makes up the leading share of all the other countries in 2000. That large red part on the left is the rest of the world, which is made up of countries exporting smaller shares. After 2000, however, Chinese competition reduced Mexican exports to the United States. What we see is by 2016, China has by far the largest share of U.S. imports of apparel. Our research estimates the effects on Mexico of the increase in Chinese imports into the United States. This is an exact site, and what we find is that the Chinese imports of apparel from the United States significantly reduce both employment and wages of workers in Mexico, showing once again that the experience that the U.S. workers had, which was negative from Chinese competition, was very similar in Mexico, suggesting that the U.S. and Mexican workers, again, are complements rather than substitutes. The USMCA was one of the most significant advances in the relationship. What we see is that negotiations concluded in September 2018. There was a number of pieces of implementing legislation. It was introduced in the House and the Senate and passed both in late 2019 with very strong bipartisan support. This is an extremely rare and very positive example of bipartisan cooperation. Both Republicans and Democrats understand and appreciate the importance of the Texas-Mexico trade relationship. The agreement was finally signed January 29th in 2020. But one of the key differences in this agreement from the North American Free Trade Agreement, or NAFTA, was in the labor standards provisions. I'm working on 3 research projects right now that estimate the effects of labor standards on trade. Of course, one of the reasons why the Texas-Mexico relationship is so important is this economic integration. The U.S.-China trade war increased the potential for global value chains to shift their production from China to the Texas-Mexico border. But one of the problems that we've encountered are the skills gaps. The existing supply of skills and sources of training along the border may not match very well to the changing demand for skills that come out of the USMCA. So I'm engaging in research now with Bob Shanley from Texas A&M University that focuses on quantifying the skill gap and the steps that could be taken to have successful shifts of global value chains to the McAllen-Reynosa region. Of course, I understand that what's probably on your mind first and foremost is the COVID-19 crisis. The COVID-19 shock first hit and continues to hit the service industry very hard. It's now hitting, of course, many other sectors as well. In Texas, the effects have been varied throughout Texas and across the country, of course. Looking into 2020, obviously in April 2020, which is when I'm recording this presentation, we know that COVID-19 dominates the news. We're optimistic that we'll be able to find a solution and quell the crisis. But nevertheless, it's trivial to say that the effects on the economy and the Texas-Mexico relationship may be extremely significant. It's very obvious that that's going to be the case. Our current research focuses on some of the main aspects of how our relationship might change and what we can do to sustain and strengthen the Texas-Mexico relationship. Thank you very much for your attention, and we look forward to staying.